If it's been found that you have a septated uterus, don't lose hope. It's very easily correctable, particularly in this 21st century in which we live in. We can correct a septated uterus by going through a hysteroscopy, and the septum can be removed. But remember, this may lead to scarring tissue, which may impact the success of the implantation process. The other structural abnormality that exists are the intrauterine adhesions, also known as the Usherman's syndromes. These are scarring tissues that occur within the uterine cavity from things like previous surgeries, D&Cs, infections, and surgeries like cesarean sections. The way these will impact the success of your IVF cycle is, remember, scarring is thick, tough, fibrous tissue that often doesn't have any blood supply through it. So if you have scarring within your uterine cavity, this scarring is likely to replace the healthy endometrial lining in that section of your uterus. And we can't directly say where the embryo is going to try to implant itself. If you have extensive scarring throughout your uterine cavity, that means that your endometrial lining is not going to be the thick, tortuous, and healthy state that we need it to be in order for implantation to happen. So a lot of scarring means that the embryo is going to try to implant itself within the scarring tissue. If that's the case, obviously implantation is going to fail. Also, another way that scarring can affect the success of the IVF cycle is because if there's lots of scarring, it will distort the uterine cavity. So not only is the blood supply to it causes a very irregular shape of the cavity itself. It is possible to remove mild scarring through the hysteroscopy procedure. However, if your fertility specialist tells you that the scarring is moderate, severe, I would think about other ways to conceive. It's just not worth making your body go through that added amount of stress. And the final uterine structural abnormality that we're going to talk about is adenomyosis. In this condition, basically the endometrial lining starts to grow within the muscle bulk itself, known as the myometrium. So the endometrial tissue is supposed to stay within its bound and line the uterine cavity, making it an appropriate environment for the growing fetus to grow in. And it's supposed to stay in the uterine cavity alone. It is not supposed to be found outside of the uterus, in which case it's known as endometriosis. But when it's found within the myometrium, which is the muscle bulk of the uterus, it's known as adenomyosis. How it impacts the IVF cycle is by causing inflammation not only of the endometrial lining itself, but also inflammation of the myometrium. Remember, as the baby grows, the muscle bulk of the uterus, again called the myometrium, needs to be healthy and uninflamed in order for it to be able to expand adequately as the pregnancy progresses. However, if it's inflamed, if it's injured, the structure is damaged by the endometrial tissue that is growing within it, then it is very likely that it may lead to a failure of the IVF cycle because it alters contractility it will obstruct implantation, and even when implantation does manage to occur, it's going to impact the developing placenta, leading to quite possibly poor health of the placenta. It's more common in women over 35, those who have endometriosis, so it's not uncommon to have both endometriosis and adenomyosis to coexist together.